You found a place to rent and you're ready to sign your agreement. But be careful before you draw on any lines so that you are sure you understand what you're really getting yourself into. My objective for you is to make you prepared for what to expect so that you can feel confident in the contract you are entering. We are going to use a residential lease agreement form that is approved by the Association of Realtors and provided by this video sponsor, America's Realty Group. Overall, you will find that most lease contracts will have these elements. This review is intended to give you insight on what to look out for in the general aspect of a lease agreement. There are A through I, 7 items, so we'll start with the term. This is your lease start and end date. B, the exact monthly rent amount. Also, if you move in after the 1st or move out before the end of the month, those months can be prorated as well, and that amount will be stated there. C indicates whether you or your landlord will pay all utilities or in part. For example, maybe your landlord will pay gas, water, trash, and they ask that you pay electricity and Wi-Fi. D, the security deposit cost will be stated here and which bank that money will be held at. Most states require this money to go into a dedicated account, so it's not just sitting in your landlord's personal bank account. The general purpose of this cost is for insurance on late rent or to cover property damage, or otherwise it's refunded to you at the end of your lease when you move out. E, the penalty for rent paid late will be here. So most states have limits on what landlords can charge for late rent. As you can see here, it is a percentage of the overdue amount. However, sometimes it can just be a flat fee. Generally, the 1st to the 5th of each month, you have a grace period before any late fees are applied. And it won't state this in your lease per se, so it's up to you to communicate with your landlord what their expectations are. F, the pet terms will be indicated here. If you're allowed a pet, then you'll input whatever information is required to know about your pet and establish what fee there is, if there is one. Typically, the fee is paid monthly in addition to your rent, and there also can be a deposit that acts just like your security deposit to cover any repairs caused by your pet. But note, this deposit is not always refundable, so you'll want to look out for that. G, you'll find that most rentals will have limits on occupancy in correlation with the size of the space. If you have children or regular visitors, they are considered an occupant. While they are not identified as tenants, they are held responsible under the tenants. The biggest thing here is that it tells the landlord who to expect will be in the home. H, if any important notices need to be sent to either you or your landlord, the addresses and contact information will go here. For you, obviously, it will be the address of the unit you are renting at. For your landlord, it will be either their direct or business contact information. I, if the space was built before 1978, your landlord must disclose what they know about the presence of lead-based paint. You will receive a full disclosure on what this is all about, why it's important to know, the safety hazards connected to it, and your options for dealing with it. You will have to prove that you received this information, and you'll initial that here. Moving on through the lease agreement, you'll see clauses stating the specific details on each term you have written in. In addition, there may be a clause on property use, meaning whether or not your space can be used for a hotel, commercial, or business, or some other non-residential purpose. Now, this may seem obvious, but you'll want to be clear on this in case you plan on running a business in your space or even considering an Airbnb. It's best to understand this up front before you think you're getting yourself into something and realize you're in violation of your lease terms. There will be a clause on inspections. Your landlord, as the owner or manager of the property use, will have rights to inspect and enter the place for any reasonable reason and with proper notification. The covenant clause here essentially overviews the maintenance, repair, and physical care of the space for both you and your landlord. Your landlord will promise to keep the space livable, up to legal code, and make any necessary repairs. You, on the other hand, will promise to do your part in keeping the space livable, free of damage, and not make major alterations to the space. You want to keep the space peaceful for your neighbors, not break any laws, and not set the place on fire. Some lease agreements may request that you maintain renter's insurance policy as well, but we'll go more into this in another section in another video, but just know this is a possibility. Now, changing locks is something to be expected as not permitted, but most landlords will charge a fee for lost keys and openers. While this may seem a little petty, just imagine if you live in a secured building and you lose your keys. Your landlord may have to, pay to rekey the master security for the sake of the building safety. So here is where you'll input the cost for the cover of that expense. So I know I say typically, generally a lot, but just work with me here because I just want to be sure that you understand that these are general rules. So typically there's a clause on lease transferring, also known as subletting or assignment. Basically, your landlord will set the rules on whether or not you can transfer your tenancy to another person that they have not approved of or even know of. As a tenant, you might find the opportunity of subletting valuable to you if you may be gone for months at a time and want to assign your place to someone while you're away. That way it can help cover paying expenses. If it's not permitted in your lease, then you can typically do so without needing the landlord's consent. Regardless, it's wise to get permission and negotiate those circumstances way ahead of time. Damage to tenant's property is the clause on protecting your personal belongings. Essentially, the owner of the home is not going to be responsible for the tenant's personal belongings. Holdover clause states the terms on what happens with the entire lease agreement at the end of the overall lease. In some states, it's allowed that the lease term can just continue on month-to-month basis until there is a written 30-day notice to end it. This means you won't have to worry about packing and leaving after a 12-month lease or re-signing on a whole new lease term every year. Your lease will just continue on until the termination has been formally made by either parties. The exact time and day and condition of the property that is expected of when you move out will be stated here. What happens if the property is destroyed during your lease and it wasn't your fault? Well, this clause will ensure that you will not be responsible for the damage or repairs or even the rent during that time period until the property is recovered. Breaching your lease means that you, in some way, you're not following the rules set out in the agreement, and the landlord has the right to enter and recover the premises with the proper notice and under fair terms. In addition, there may be a clause on early termination. So if you and the landlord, for some reason, agree to end the lease early, you will know here what you will be responsible for on any fees and money owed to remedy the contract. Your lease may also cover other miscellaneous matters like rules and regulations of amenities or package deliveries, pet rules, and garbage disposal, which is common if you'll be living in a building, but also things like drug use, firearms, and theft. In the end, signatures will be written between the tenants and the property owners. Nowadays, it's common and legal to have this electronically signed, and it's most important to receive a final copy of your landlord's signature. I say this because many times with electronic signatures, the tenant will sign before the owner and then never receive a copy of the lease where they can actually see the landlord's signature and ensure no changes have been made. As I have mentioned before, lease and rental agreements are in fact negotiable contracts. You don't necessarily need to agree on the document that is just presented in front of you. If there are things that are important to you and not addressed, then you have the power to make those modifications. Thanks for watching this section of the Renter's Resource series. Stay tuned for part 3, where we will go over common rules like cost control and negotiating fees and charges.